Welcome, friends, to Beyond the Crucible, the podcast that dares to talk about setback and failure, but not so we can commiserate. It's so we can elevate. I'm Gary Schneeberger, the co-host of the show, and our mission today is to offer you the hope that your crucible experiences, those setbacks and failures, traumas and tragedies that you've experienced or are experiencing right now, don't define you. They refine you. They did not happen to you. They happened for you. And I don't know many people. I probably know no one who knows that better than the founder of Beyond the Crucible, the host of this podcast, and my friend, Warwick Fairfax. Warwick, we've got another great episode, I think, today in our summer series about classic films that have classic crucible lessons. This is part 3, and this is a change of pace for us because the first 2 have not perhaps been the most redemptive stories. This is a great one for that. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I know you are too.
Absolutely. This is a fun movie and a great story, and looking forward to it.
And that fun movie, folks, is Singin' in the Rain, 1952. Starring Gene Kelly, co-directed by Gene Kelly. It is part of, in this series, Classic Films, Classic Crucible Lessons. We are pulling movies from the American Film Institute, AFI's 100 Best Movies of All Time. And this was number 5 on the list of the best movies. And you may have heard me intimate early this idea that the first couple episodes of the series, this is the 3rd one, the first couple episodes were about films that were 1 and 2 on that list, but they weren't exactly the most redemptive films. In other words, the focus of those films, while there were crucibles there, the focus of the protagonists in those films, they didn't really learn the lessons of their crucibles and go on to lead a life of significance. Good news, everybody. This is not the case for this film. We've got redemption. We've got learning the lessons of their crucibles. And we've got some really, really good insights, I think, that we can offer to you as you cope with your own crucibles. And hopefully we'll do it in a way that's entertaining as well as insightful. So, Warwick, I ask you every week that we do this show, just so we can level set listeners and viewers on why we're doing this. Explain a little bit about why films are such a ripe wellspring to pull lessons from when it comes to bouncing forward from crucible experiences.
Yeah, in classic films, there's typically a crisis, a challenge, a crucible that the hero or protagonist has to rise above. It wouldn't be much of a movie if everything's going right, there are no challenges, and I mean, why would you watch a movie like that? So basically, in pretty much every movie, there's a test of character, there's a lesson that the hero, so to speak, needs to learn. And in most movies, there's a crisis that tests the main protagonist's character. Some rise above it and are not defined by it, and some don't rise above the crucible and indeed are defined by that crucible. So it's a good way of understanding crucibles and how some rise above it and some learn the lessons of their crucible and some don't. So it's a great way of just discussing crucibles and what we can learn from them.
Right. And it's true about crucibles in this series as it is about anything. You can learn either from success or something that's not quite success. You can learn from the good and you can learn from the bad. Life can teach us lessons from The Godfather and from Citizen Kane, the first 2 movies that we did, right? We could extract lessons about how to navigate crucibles that were very evocative from those movies. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it was like, not that it felt heavy when we were doing it, but this is going to be just a lot more fun because there's a lot more joy in this film, I guess. And that film, as we said at the top, is Singin' in the Rain. So why is Singin' in the Rain, title of the film and a concept in the film, why is Singin' in the Rain something that can help us turn our setbacks into significance, our trials into triumphs?
You know, I got to say that I've watched this movie quite a lot of times and I love it. And you see the scene of Singing in the Rain, where Gene Kelly is literally singing in the rain, and we'll kind of unpack that in more detail later. So that's kind of fun. It's raining and he's singing. That's kind of cool. But I never really thought about it in that much depth until we watched the movie for, to look at what we can learn at Beyond the Crucible from this movie. And so as I thought about it, there is a wider metaphor of that whole concept of singing in the rain. And that's when bad things happen, challenges, we have a choice. We can either be bitter or angry at ourselves or at others, or we can find a way to move ahead. We can find a way to say, okay, this was unfair. I made some mistakes, but how do I move forward? How do I find some redemption out of this crucible? How do I find a way to use this to serve others? We often say on Beyond the Crucible, how can I change this crucible from looking at it saying it happened to me to it happened for me? How do I pivot my attitude to the crucible? And that's really where there's a choice. And so in Singing in the Rain, Gene Kelly exemplifies making this choice. It's raining, and he makes a choice to be happy, even though he is getting completely soaked. I mean, how many people do you know, at least before this movie anyway, when it's raining and they're going, hey, it's raining. This is awesome. I'm getting soaked. And isn't this so cool? It's just not typically what you do. But I think Singing in the Rain exemplifies having a positive attitude and almost seeing our trials and crucibles as gifts, rather than something to weigh us down. It's a remarkable metaphor. If you look at it a bit more deeply than I did, with Singing in the Rain as a metaphor for life is when challenges happen, how do I find a way to have a positive attitude as we're thinking, what can I learn from this? Maybe it'll help me pivot to a vision that's truly authentic. Maybe I can pivot to a vision that will really help others, and there'll be some form of redemption for me and for other people. It's really a wider metaphor that I never really thought about in this movie, but it is a great metaphor.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about doing series on films is that, especially ones we've seen many, many times before, it's like, oh, wait a minute, that applies perfectly to what we talk about at Beyond the Crucible. And it's also interesting because it will allow me the opportunity, Warwick, I can sing and dance in the rain myself. I promise, folks, I'm not going to sing nor dance. I just wanted to turn an umbrella on while I was here. So,
well, that is so cool, Gary. I mean, I'm not going to sing, but in Maryland today, it is actually raining. So it's quite appropriate. But yes, I'm not outside, so therefore, we're not going to do an outside set where I'm getting soaked and I'm singing, which would be possible given the conditions. But
we can. I'm sure the listeners and viewers would wait while you went and repositioned yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's start talking about the movie, because here's the fun part about musicals. The first, we did The Godfather last week, and that's a long movie. That's a 3-hour movie, and there's a lot of lessons in it, and you're taking notes through the whole thing. The great thing about a musical, when you're trying to extract meaningful moments that pertain to how you move beyond crucibles and how you find your life of significance, you're not normally going to find those in the lyrics of the songs. Now, that's not true. We'll talk about the lyrics of the songs here a little bit, but most of the time when the musical numbers came on, I was like, oh, okay, I can just sit back and enjoy them. I don't have to take notes, which was kind of a fun thing. But the movie begins, the opening scenes introduce us to Hollywood in 1927. We meet silent film star Don Lockwood, Gene Kelly, who, as I said earlier, also co-directed, and Lena Lamont, who's played by Jean Hagen, who you'll find out as we keep talking why her performance was so extraordinary. It was so extraordinary, in fact, that she was nominated for an Oscar. Jean Hagen was, for playing Lena Lamont. And we meet them as they attend the premiere of their latest film, The Royal Rascal. Film studio Monument Pictures encourages rumors of a romance between Don and Lena. Don dislikes the rumors and barely tolerates her, but Lena believes Don loves her. She's a bit delusional, Lena is. You'll see more of that as the movie goes on as well. And at a red carpet interview, Don tells the story of his rise to stardom. I don't know if you noticed this, by the way, Warwick, the gossip columnist who interviewed him, the actress who played her played Aunt Harriet in the old Batman TV show. That's who the actress was who played.
Really?
Yeah. That was the actress who played the getting the true, the true scoop from Don Lockwood, or so she thought, because Don says he grew up in a cultured and highly educated environment, but his words are contradicted by flashbacks showing his humble roots as a hoofer, vaudeville musician, and stuntman, along with his childhood best friend, Cosmo Brown. And Cosmo Brown is played by Donald O'Connor, who's delightful in this movie, folks. If you've never seen it, Donald O'Connor, reason enough to watch this movie. Delightful. But what shines through in a Beyond the Crucible context in that opening scene with Don Lockwood telling his story, Warwick, is that he's not living an authentic life. That's one of the key prerequisites to a life of significance. And while we aren't sure yet what crucibles Don may have experienced, he's certainly not living his life with authenticity. When we meet Don Lockwood, and Don Lockwood is there at the premiere, and he's waxing, nostalgic about his upbringing and how it was, he's not, and then we see pictures of what his upbringing really was like. He's not living authentically. So the question I have for you, Warwick, is what are some lessons we can learn from the way Don has lived his life up to this point and the way he is portraying it? Why is the dissonance between the two a warning sign, can be a warning sign for us if we're doing the same thing, that our life is not on the track it should be?
Yeah, it's a good question, Gary. From the opening scene, we see that Don Lockwood is living a life of inauthenticity. He's living a life that he wants people to see. He gets out of the limo and he's waving his arms and there's the plastic smile.
Right.
Somebody tries to come near him and he sort of slightly, pushes the person aside as if, without seeming so obvious about it. And
right.
Here am I with my loving fans. And it's just this smile. He's playing a role. He's not meant to be in a movie at that moment, so to speak, but he's playing a role of the successful movie star. And the way he talks about his upbringing, he manufactures out of whole cloth a completely fabricated upbringing. He starts off by saying, dignity, always dignity. That's right. What I heard in my family. I had a refined education and a dignified upbringing. And the filmmakers of Singing in the Rain did a wonderful job of a montage as he's waxing lyrical about his dignified upbringing, about he grew up in a poor background with his best buddy, Cosmo Brown. It didn't feel like the home life was too good, or with his dad, he had to really scrap for everything. He had to make his way up in small music halls in vaudeville. Eventually he got kind of a break and was a stunt man, which is obviously sort of a dangerous profession, certainly back then. And he was in an initial movie with Lena Lamont as a stunt man. And eventually the producer or head of Monumental Pictures, R.F. Simpson, picked him up to be a star. But so, he made it up a pretty difficult path. But what's interesting is I love in movies when people aren't a complete cartoon character. It's all about me and I'm inauthentic and who cares? It's all about the money and fame. There was a side of that. But yet, one of the things that the movie studio wanted to do, which is sort of common back then and maybe even today at times, is they wanted to foster an image that their two big stars, Don Lockwood and Lena Lamont, had a romance going on.
Right.
And Don had no time for Lena because she was 100% out for herself. You get in my way and there's going to be trouble. I mean, she did not really sugarcoat it at all. It was clear. And so Don almost detested Lena, had no respect for her. So when the publicity person, when the interviewer was trying to egg them on and let's hear some details about the romance, he would say diplomatically, we've made some great pictures together, but he would not go there and say, yes, it's true, we're in love. He would not say that because it wasn't true. So even Don Lockwood had lines of inauthenticity that he wouldn't cross. Right. He had his limits of how far you could push him.
And there was an interesting scene in the flashback that kind of speaks to that, right? It's the one where Don's a stuntman on the picture that Lena Lamont's the star of. And she's sitting there, right? She's someone's fanning her with like palm fronds or something. And he comes up as a stars in his eyes stuntman. And here's the great Lena Lamont. And he's like talking to her and trying to just say how much he likes her. And she totally blows him off. She treats him like he's, nothing. Because in her eyes, he is nothing. And I think that speaks to your point that Don Lockwood, he ended up living an inauthentic life, but he had authentic character. It was always there. And it shows up in that scene where after, he talks to Lena, he realizes, okay, that's a bridge too far. I think what we end up seeing in Don Lockwood's character is that he never turns into as inauthentic as his life is. He never turns into a Lena Lamont type. So, good point that you extracted there about his inauthenticity has its limits.
Yeah, and in a sense, Lena, in some ways, was a gift to Don Lockwood because she represented everything he didn't want to be, completely self-serving, and he just did not want to go there. And I think it would haunt him. There was a struggle within his soul for the authentic Don and the inauthentic Don. And we'll see that play out in the rest of the movie. But certainly there's a lesson early on here that if you go down the life of inauthenticity, of trying to cultivate this image that you think people want to see, it will have consequences for you and for those that you love. And it's a dangerous road that Don could have gone down. And we'll see later, kind of there's a redemptive arc. But you don't want to be a Don Lockwood. You certainly don't want to be a Lena Lamont. As we'll see, that has consequences. So early on, there are lessons, I think, for all of us about the consequences of inauthenticity and just who you really don't want to be.
Yeah. And the filmmakers, who include Gene Kelly, as you said, do a great job in the flashback scenes when he's talking to the gossip columnist out in front of the theater. Because there's the smile, right? There's a huge difference between that kind of Hollywood plastic smile that Don Lockwood's got when he's telling his story about dignity, always dignity, right? And he's got this very kind of officious smile on his face. Right. And then you watch him in the vaudeville scenes with Cosmo, and it's just pure joy radiating through every both fiber of his face as he's smiling, and then also in his body language and the way he and Cosmo interact. It's clear, if you're paying attention as you're watching the movie, that the Don Lockwood who is the Hollywood star isn't really happy internally, at least not as happy as the Don Lockwood who was chewing it up with his buddy Cosmo on vaudeville. And I think that's a great thing that the filmmakers, including Kelly, do and sort of dropping that right there, just to foreshadow what's to come.
Yeah, great point.
So the premiere is a enormous success because it's a Lockwood Lamont picture, so everybody loves them. And Don escapes. He actually gets mobbed, sort of like the Beatles got mobbed or Sinatra got mobbed when he was starting out by fans who they tear his tuxedo, and he's got to jump into a passing car. Driven by a woman named Kathy Selden, a young woman named Kathy Selden. And that is, Kathy Selden is played by an even younger, I would guess, Debbie Reynolds. In other words, she probably played younger than her character was supposed to be at the time. It was her first major film. And Kathy claims to be a theater actress. And we find out that maybe she's not being totally authentic, but hang on a second. We'll get to that in a minute. But she drives Don to the premiere's after party. And as she does so, she expresses disdain for what screen acting is, right? Because it's just, as she says, it's a bunch of dumb show. It's just a lot of dumb show. At the after party, Monumental Pictures head R.F. Simpson, to entertain the guests, shows a short demonstration of something that was just invented called the talking picture. There's a gentleman there. It's just a guy talking into a microphone, but one of the guests sees it. None of them are impressed. One of them calls it vulgar. Another says it'll be a fad. It's going to go away, in weeks. Everybody thinks silent pictures are the future. Kathy's then revealed as the scene goes on to be a chorus girl hired to perform at the party. She actually makes her appearance bursting out of a cake, right? One of those big models of a cake. She bursts out of that, surprising Don and everybody else and leading Don to tease her a little bit. Furious at that teasing, she throws a cake at him, but he dodges it. And as an audience member, I was kind of happy. Lena gets hit in the face with it. So you're like, oh, okay. It's like a 2-for-1. You get to know a little bit more about Kathy. You get to know a little bit more, and you get to see Lena get a bit of her comeuppance, which is kind of fun. She then runs away. Kathy does, before Don can catch up with her. The film then jumps ahead about 3 weeks. Don has become a bit infatuated with Kathy, we discover, but he can't find her. He's looking all over for her, but he can't find her. And he's kind of he's infatuated, but he's also a little depressed because he really wants to talk to her. Something about her intrigued him. The way that she didn't tear at his clothes or fawn at him because he was a movie star. There was something there, right? Through his maybe inauthenticity, he saw her authenticity and saw what maybe it could bring out of him. Not fully unpacked, but there's something there that makes him sad that he can't find her. And this is when Cosmo shows up, and Cosmo tries to cheer Don up. He just wants to get Don out of the funk that he's in. And he performs one of the movie's most memorable songs called Make 'Em Laugh. And folks, if you've never seen this, I wouldn't encourage you to turn us off because I think we have more insights to offer, but watch that scene because that scene is something else that Cosmo Brown, Donald O'Connor performs, Make 'Em Laugh. But the key point here, Warwick, for our discussion is this. Cosmo reveals himself in this scene not just to be a lifelong friend of Don Lockwood. He also reveals himself to be an important, in our language, fellow traveler. Don is down. He's shaken by what Kathy's told him, criticizing him as being nothing but a shadow on film. And it's made him doubt the vision he's living out. So Cosmo lifts his spirits, literally lifts his spirits by making him laugh. So I'll ask you this, Warwick. Cheering Don up is certainly not all that makes Cosmo a fellow traveler, an important person to Don Lockwood. But it is our first glimpse of just how he is a fellow traveler. Why are fellow travelers who can snap us out of our doldrums so important to us coming back from a crucible?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's interesting about this scene is the fact that Don actually needs cheering up. There's something about Kathy Selden that's really gnawing away at his soul. I mean, she finds out eventually that he's a successful movie star, and she's not impressed. I mean, yes, she's trying to become a stage actor, but all of his charm would work on many other women. It's not really working on her. She has an authentic core, so it's like she was not impressed. If anything, she was quite she was just like dismissive. Well, Don Lockwood's not faced somebody like Kathy Selden before, it would seem. And it's almost like he knew that what her disdain almost for who he was and what he did, he knew it was true. So he was infatuated with her, captivated by her, but there was something about her that was like, subconsciously, this is somebody I need in my life because she is calling forth my true authentic self, even though I don't think there's any way that he realized it at the time. But it really, really got under his skin. He just could not shake it. And, it was her attitude, her, in a sense, without, well, I guess she did say somewhat explicitly calling him out, it just really put him into the dumps. So Cosmo, as a great friend of Don Lockwood, really wanted to cheer his buddy up. And what's neat is they've been fellow travelers since an early age. In the opening montage of the movie, we see them, being kids playing together. They made their way up the ladder in show business together on, remote music halls and vaudeville. They're lifelong buddies. This is another area where Don Lockwood deserves credit. Because in the opening scene, when the interviewer wants to, delve into the whole alleged romance between Don and Lena, he doesn't go there, but instead deflects it and talks about his best buddy, Cosmo Brown, brings Cosmo in, kind of gives him a hug, and just basically say how much, he owes where he is to Cosmo, basically saying what a great guy is. That was pretty amazing. So Don stands up for Cosmo, and Cosmo has always been there for Don. And so when Cosmo sings Make 'Em Laugh, he is trying to find some way, anyway, to get Don out of his funk. And if you, watch that whole episode of that song, I mean, he doesn't just sing, he dances, he, climbs up doors. I mean, it's, does somersaults. I mean, he's really going all out, full court press, if you will. And I'm going to, one way or the other, I'm going to get my best buddy out of his funk. So I think, what we can learn here is sometimes we face challenges. Some days can feel like, if it's not our worst day, it can feel like pretty dark, cloudy days. And on those days especially, we may not feel like we can pick ourselves up. We might feel like we've got no energy, no motivation, and we need fellow travelers, those friends alongside us who can help pick us up. And because we just may not be able to do it ourselves. So having fellow travelers like Cosmo is really critical. We need people like that. We're going to have days when things don't look too good, and we need a friend to talk to give us counsel, just to listen to us and give us some hope and encouragement.
Yeah. And the way that you described and the way it plays out, that Make 'Em Laugh scene shows just how far, right, as you said, how far Cosmo will go to get a laugh out of his friend. And I think that's an important characteristic for fellow travelers, to really lean into encouraging, helping direct, counseling, just being there for those who have been through a crucible. I mean, in this particular scene, Cosmo does it only in the context of making him laugh, and he makes funny faces, as you said, and he climbs up walls and does a miraculous backflip off a wall a couple of times. But it speaks, even if you're not someone who can do that, folks, you can still be a fellow traveler who goes the extra mile to help your friend navigate a crucible experience, a critical point of learning for us in this film. As the film goes on, Warner Brothers, a rival studio to Monumental Pictures, releases its first talking picture, The Jazz Singer. That actually happened, folks. That's a real life story, to wide acclaim. R.F. Simpson, the head of the studio, Monumental, decides he has no choice but to convert the next Lockwood and Lamont film, The Dueling Cavalier, into a talkie. Lena and Don then undertake elocution lessons in preparation for, now they got to speak. They have to talk while they act. The production, though, is beset with difficulties once they switch to a talkie. Most notably of those is that Lena's got not the most mellifluous voice. She's got a bit of a grating, sharp, some might say annoying voice, and she doesn't enunciate very well. There's also problems with the recording technology, which of course is brand new. They've never done this before. So there's multiple complications, including awkward microphone placements. Don's not very good at improvising when he's got to speak at the same time. And then, of course, the audio, which is recorded on a record, right, and played in sync with the movie, gets out of sync when they do that. So they do a preview screening where all of the bad things that were fed into the machine to create the film all go wrong, including it goes out of sync. And The Dueling Cavalier, it's a dismal failure. People walk out of the premiere. I never want to see that Lockwood and Lamont again. I mean, people are not pleased. It's at this moment in the film, Warwick, where there's a coalescence of crucibles. There's Don feeling like his career is going to come to a screeching halt. Oh my gosh, talking pictures are here and I'm terrible in them, right? That's what he's thinking. The studio could be on the precipice of collapse if it can't adapt to the new technology, which is everybody's switching to. All studios are switching to it because The Jazz Singer was so popular. But then, and here's the turning point. Kathy joins Cosmo as a fellow traveler for Don, and they hatch the idea of turning the movie into a musical that will allow Don to lean into his gifts and talents, a critical aspect of crafting a vision that leads to fulfillment after a crucible. Kathy and Cosmo even devise a way to work around Lena's screechy voice and lack of singing ability, having Kathy dub all her lines and songs. Don is so happy going home after they have this conversation, after his now two fellow travelers join with him to navigate away beyond the crucibles, that as he walks home during a rainstorm, he sings Singin' in the Rain.
I have to keep talking about it, but you're going to like it a lot better listening and watching Don Lockwood do it. So here's that clip.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face. I'll walk down the lane with a happy refrain, just singing, singing in the rain.
Talk a little bit about the mindset shift in helping us turn our crucibles into opportunities. That's what Don does here. There's a mindset shift for him, aided by his fellow travelers. I don't think we could have a clearer picture of what great fellow travelers bring to our journeys from trials to triumphs. What can we learn from what happens at this point in the picture?
This moment in the movie where Don literally sings in the rain, it is a pivotal moment. And just so that, as we're discussing this, people can understand, around about this time in the late 20s, there's going to be a change in the movie industry, going from silent movies to talkies.
Right.
With the success of the first talking picture, The Jazz Singer, there's about to be a fundamental shift in the movie industry. Many people will not adjust. Many actors don't make the shift to talking pictures. Their voices may not work well. There tends to be a bit of overacting in silent movies just because you can't, use your words. And so there'll be many careers, probably many businesses that will be ruined by this. And so it will be very easy for R.F. Simpson, Monumental Pictures, Don, Cosmo, and Kathy to have their lives swept up in this tide of a crucible and, be ruined by it all. But rather than say, oh my gosh, we never thought that this would work. Nobody did, but The Jazz Singer is a massive success. We're doomed. The Dueling Cavalier, there's no hope because, Lena is this awful human being and she won't play ball, I imagine. And her voice is this screechy, grating voice. I mean, we know what it's like in reality, but now people will see it on the big screen. There is no hope. Let's just hide under the covers and give up. I mean, why would there be any hope? But yet they don't do that. These team of fellow travelers say, okay, what can we do? And between Cosmo and Kathy, they begin to think of, well, what happens if we think about it a bit differently? If we have Kathy basically dub for the voice and the singing voice of Lena Lamont. And it's like, this could work. And so it's their collective teamwork that comes up with this brilliant solution. And, this brainstorming continues later, as we'll see, when they meet with R.F. Simpson. That's why the scene where Don is singing in the rain is so pivotal. He could have gone through a huge crucible, a huge disaster, and he was going through a crucible. But yet here he has a glimmer of hope. At this point in the movie, it hasn't all been worked out about how they will completely adjust the movie.
Right.
R.F. Simpson doesn't know anything about this idea. It's only just happened. It's sort of it's a seed of an idea, seed of a vision. But even though it's a seed and R.F. Simpson hasn't signed off, they haven't figured out how to adjust the whole movie yet, he sees hope. And so he is able to sing in the rain. He's able to see that what could have been the greatest crucible in his life, he's able to see there's an opportunity here to make a change and save our careers and save the movie studio. And one of the fascinating things is as you look at that scene where Gene Kelly is singing this epic song, Singin' in the Rain, it's worth paying attention to the lyrics that are in that song because it is so emblematic of how those of us who face crucibles, which as we know from our study is like everybody, how we should react. And it's not easy, I realize, but this is really a great symbol of how to react when things are not going well. So these are the lyrics of this song. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling. I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds so dark up above. The sun's in my heart, and I'm ready for love. Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place. Come on with the rain. I've a smile on my face. I walk down the lane with a happy refrain. I'm singing, just singing in the rain. I mean, that's incredible. How many of us think that way? There are storm clouds in my life. I'm going to sing. I'm happy. Everybody else may be doom and gloom and let's jump off the cliff, but not me. I'll find a way to choose to be happy. I'll find a way to choose to move forward with my life. I'll find a way to turn this crucible to the benefit of myself and others. I'll find a way overall to move forward. It doesn't mean you have to literally sing during your worst, darkest day. This is, after all, a metaphor. Right. It's more just choosing to find a way to move forward, choosing not to wallow in anger and bitterness for the rest of your life. It's an inflection point where we can choose to find a way forward versus just wallowing in bitterness and anger. And so this song is a great metaphor, a great symbol of how we should approach crucibles and challenges in our life.
And I think it's also important to mention that fellow travelers, huge part of getting Don Lockwood to understand the possibility. But the other thing I think that he's singing in the rain about is that the change, making this a musical, making this movie that failed as a dramatic talkie, a musical, allows him to lean into his gifts and talents. Those things we saw in the first scene, where he was on vaudeville with Cosmo and he was singing and he was dancing and he was having fun and those smiles were so authentic. He clearly loved that part of his life. He's clearly very talented in that area. And one of the reasons I think he finds hope is because, as you say so often, lean into, as you construct your vision, your gifts and talents, what you're passionate about, what you're off the charts passionate about. And Don Lockwood is clearly off the charts passionate about singing and dancing, whether it's in the rain or not. And Hollywood being Hollywood and Lena Lamont being Lena Lamont, it doesn't end right there on a big happy note, because guess what, folks? Lena discovers the truth. And she's furious that Kathy Selden is dubbing her voice. So she barges in on a dubbing session. She becomes even angrier after she's told that Don and Kathy are in love. And she's, right, remember, thinks that Don's in love with her. Why, we don't know, but that's what she thinks, because she's kind of egocentric. No, not even kind of. Let's just say she's egocentric. And then RF, she's also angry because RF intends to give Kathy a screen credit and a big publicity buildup. He's going to launch Kathy Selden's career after she saves this movie. So Lena threatens to sue RF. In her words, given the way she talks, to sue. She's going to sue RF and the studio unless he makes sure no one ever hears of Kathy, and that she keeps dubbing Lena for the rest of Lena's career. RF reluctantly agrees because of a clause in Lena's contract that holds the studio responsible for positive media coverage. So we get to the premiere of The Dancing Cavalier. All of our story points are coming into confluence, which is what you want in a really good movie. All the things, all the balloon strings are tied together, and we get the premiere of The Dancing Cavalier. And guess what? It's a incredible success. Audiences are blown away. So much so that they clamor for Lena to sing live. So Don, Cosmo, and RF tell her in order to do that, because she's scared because she can't sing. Don, Cosmo, and RF tell her to lip sync into a microphone, while Kathy, hiding behind another curtain. So she's in front of a curtain singing. There's a microphone for Lena. Kathy's behind a curtain, and she's going to sing while Lena lip syncs. But while Lena is singing, while she's lip syncing, Don, Cosmo, and RF open the curtain, revealing the big ruse that there's another person, Kathy Selden, who the audience didn't even know about, who's actually the voice that they heard and loved in the film. Lena is humiliated and defeated, and she flees the theater in humiliation. Kathy tries to run away as well, but Don proudly announces to the whole crowd, big Hollywood premiere, that Kathy's the quote unquote real star of the film. She cries, they lock eyes, and the last scene that we see is that Kathy and Don are in front of a billboard of their new film called Singin' in the Rain, and they kiss. And we know that they are together. Warwick, the end of this film depicts the conclusion of Don's journey from trials to triumphs, as we say. He has been redeemed. I don't think that's too strong a word, from the shallow, inauthentic life he was leading to he's been redeemed and delivered into a life of significance as a man who entertains audiences with his singing and dancing talents and has found the true love of his life. That's a pretty good example of a life of significance, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, Don has made a decision to put aside his inauthentic facade and, in a sense, his inauthentic life. And really, one of the keys to the arc of redemption in Don's life is Kathy. Throughout the film, Don makes choices to fight for Kathy. Because there's something about Kathy. Yes, he's infatuated, he's attracted to her, and over time he falls in love with her. But part of why he does is he sees truth. He sees authenticity. He sees a real person that he respects and admires, and whose character he admires. And so this is somebody that he wants to fight for. This is somebody that he feels like this is an underdog, a nobody, if you will, in this world of Hollywood, of stars and all. And so there's an earlier scene where Kathy is singing in a chorus, and he makes sure that RF knows about her and, will give her a job and won't exclude her because of Lena's dislike of Kathy. Why does Lena dislike Kathy? Because Lena knows that Don is attracted to Kathy. Lena wants to take out the competition. It's like going back to The Godfather. It's like, it's not personal. Well, it is personal here. It's very personal.
Yes, indeed.
You are going to be gone. You're going to be history. You will never work again. So, ultimately Don, he risks everything by coming up with a way for Lena's actions to be exposed. There's no way of knowing it turns out as well as it did, or that RF would sign on for pulling the curtain up. He could say, we're not doing that. This is a big star. Have the security come and take Don away. Those were options that RF could have done. But I guess RF within his heart realized this isn't right. And he doesn't like getting pushed around by some star anyway. His combination of ego and the right thing happened to coalesce to help RF make the right choice, fortunately. So, but that's really the culmination of Don doing what is right and fighting for the woman he loves. But it's more than just love. It's about, being authentic and doing what's right. And so that's just an incredible scene where at the end of the movie, you can see that he's fallen in love with Kathy. He's living a truly authentic life, singing and dancing. They're truly his gifts. And I think he senses that he's put behind him this facade, this lie of inauthenticity, and he's going to be truly Don Lockwood. Maybe he'll return to the younger Don Lockwood in the vaudeville days, where he's just having fun being himself. He's got a team of fellow travelers, and Cosmo and Kathy will help keep him on the right track to success is fine, but success founded on being authentic, success founded on caring for others. So I think it's really a great end to the movie, but there's certainly a lot of credit is due Cosmo for always sticking by his side as a fellow traveler. And in a sense, Kathy Selden is sowing the seeds of his redemption, showing him an image of a person is authentic, somebody that he cares for, somebody he wants to fight for, somebody who wants to put his energy into helping, somebody receive some measure of justice and do what is right. So it's a wonderful scene at the end of the movie, and it's a wonderful sort of arc of redemption and in Don Lockwood's life, and turning from the inauthentic to the authentic.
Yeah. And when we started this conversation about 45, 50 minutes ago, you mentioned that there's a lot of lessons about bouncing back from crucibles in this movie, and that it is a story of redemption. What would you say among all that we've talked about is the chief lesson of Singin' in the Rain as it pertains to bouncing back from a crucible that everyone can relate to? Because let's face it, most of the folks who are listening and watching us right now probably aren't Hollywood stars. That's probably a fair case to guess. If you are a Hollywood star and you're listening, fantastic, keep doing it. But for folks who are going through crucibles, perhaps less high profile than oh my gosh, my multi-million-dollar movie career might fail. What's the chief takeaway for people who are going through? Maybe they lost a job, maybe they set a goal for something and they couldn't achieve it. What's the chief takeaway from the story of Singin' in the Rain, and particularly the journey of Don Lockwood?
Yeah, it's a good question, Gary. I think to me, one of the chief lessons is that leading an inauthentic life, it leads to inner conflict, inner turmoil. From the first scene in the movie, we see this inner conflict within Don Lockwood. He has this plastic smile. He talks about this rarefied, dignified upbringing, dignity, always dignity. And the reality was it was a hard scrabble life, which wasn't easy. So, but he was sort of at war with himself. He was at war with himself. There was grains of hope, if you will, in which he stood by his buddy Cosmo. He wouldn't go along with the movie studio publicity machine that wanted to foster sort of a story of love between him and Lena Lamont. So there were grains of hope, but he was in conflict. And when you're in a conflict like that, it can tempt you to make decisions that will hurt other people. To lead a life of significance, a life on purpose dedicated to serving others, it's not all about you. And when you look at the contrast between Don Lockwood and Lena Lamont, you have one whose soul was in the balance. He was grappling for, would he go down the path of authenticity? Would he go down the path of just inauthenticity? Would he serve others or serve himself? There was conflict. With Lena Lamont, there was no such conflict. She is a good example of somebody that was all about her, all about herself and her own success. And contrary to how she might have appeared a bit ditzy, she was actually highly intelligent.
Yeah, quite
she
calculated.
Had a lawyer. Oh, very much so. She had a lawyer and publicity agent craft, a very clever agreement that ensured good publicity and gave her a lot of leverage over the head of the movie studio, R.F. Simpson, to, it would seem like, have Kathy for the rest of her career dub her lines and singing voice. So she was no idiot. She was very smart, very calculating, but she's really somebody that's emblematic of who you don't want to be. She was willing to do whatever it takes to succeed and was willing to hurt people. In fact, I think she got some measure of enjoyment about hurting and trying to ruin Kathy Selden's career, because after all, it's all about me. There was sort of this dark enjoyment in that. So, we really have a choice. But, as smart and as driven as Lena Lamont was, being Lena Lamont does not lead to a life of joy and fulfillment. I mean, self-serving actions, a self-serving attitude, focusing all on yourself, saying, I'm going to be number one, I'm going to squash anybody in my way, that leads to anger and bitterness, and ultimately it will not serve you. I think the better path is leading an authentic life focused on others. That's a life that leads to joy, fulfillment, and significance. And that's the path that Don Lockwood chooses. So ultimately, this very fun, enjoyable movie has some key lessons for us. One key lesson is that we have a choice. Do we want to go down the path of Don Lockwood or the path of Lena Lamont? Ultimately, do we want to be Lena Lamont or Don Lockwood? That's a choice that all of us have to face in life.
Good point. Good. In fact, Warwick, I like to put inspirational thoughts, pictures of things on T-shirts. I might get a T-shirt that says, "Don't be a Lena," and just see if I get any questions from folks. About, what does that mean? And then I can tell them the whole story. Folks, as we always do on these episodes where we talk about classic movies in our series, classic films, classic Crucible lessons, I've got a reflection question for you to ponder. And this one was really fun for me to create because it just sort of leapt after I finished watching the movie. And that's this. Reflect on this, folks. How hard or easy is it for you to sing in the rain? What mindset shifts can you make to better ensure you face crucibles, not as something that happened to you, but as something that happened for you? Interesting perspective to take out of this incredibly enjoyable, incredibly engaging, incredibly charming, fun, action-packed, not in the Hollywood action blockbuster way, but just the dancing and the singing. And it's a beautiful film with a beautiful message. And let me add this before I close. If you've enjoyed the conversation Warwick and I have had here, I'd encourage you to do what you do when you've seen a movie that you enjoy, like Singin' in the Rain. Tell your friends about it. If you've enjoyed this conversation, if you're enjoying this series, if you're enjoying this podcast in general, tell your friends about it. Share it with them as you would say, hey, go see this movie. I just saw it yesterday and boy, was it great. Pass on a recommendation to help people who you may not even know your friends are going through crucible experiences because they may be keeping it close to their vests. So I encourage you, Warwick encourages you, I'll speak on behalf of him. We encourage you at Beyond the Crucible to share this show, not just this episode, but the podcast in general, because your friends will be able to find some true insight and action steps they can take to move beyond their worst day. Until we have our next episode of Classic Films, Classic Crucible Lessons, please remember, we'll be here next week and we'll save a seat for you.
Welcome to a journey of transformation with the Beyond the Crucible assessment. Unlike any other, this tool is designed to guide you from adversity to achievement. As you answer a few insightful questions, you won't just find a label like the helper or the individualist. Instead, you'll uncover your unique position in the journey of resilience. This assessment reveals where you stand today, the direction you should aim for, and crucially, the steps to get there. It's more than an assessment. It's a roadmap to a life of significance.
Ready? Visit beyondthecrucible.com. Take the free assessment and start charting your course to a life of significance today.